Why the shapes of demand and supply curves matter. The shapes and positions of the demand and supply curves determine how much a shock affects the equilibrium price and quantity. We illustrate the importance of the shape of the demand curve by showing how our comparative statics results would change if the processed pork demand curve had a different shape. We continue to use the estimated supply curve of pork and examine what happens if the price of hogs increases by 25 cents, causing the supply curve of pork to shift to the left from capital S superscript 1 to capital S superscript 2 in panel A of figure 2.8. In the actual market, the shift of the supply curve causes a movement along the downward sloping demand curve capital D superscript 1, so the equilibrium quantity falls from $220 to 215 million kilograms per year, and the equilibrium price rises from $3.30 to $3.55 per kilogram. The supply shock and increase in the price of hogs hurts consumers by increasing the equilibrium price of processed pork by 25 cents per kilogram. Consequently, customers buy less of it, 215 million kilograms instead of 220 million kilograms. A supply shock would have different effects if the demand curve had a different shape. Suppose that the quantity demanded were not sensitive to a change in the price, so the same amount is demanded no matter what the price is, as the vertical demand curve capital D superscript 2 in panel B shows. A 25-cent increase in the price of hogs again shifts the supply curve from capital S superscript 1 to capital S superscript 2. The equilibrium quantity does not change, but the price consumers pay rises by 37.5 cents to $3.65. Thus, the amount consumers spend rises by more when the demand curve is vertical instead of downward sloping. Now suppose that consumers are very sensitive to price changes, as the horizontal demand curve, capital D superscript 3, in panel C shows. Consumers will buy virtually unlimited quantities of pork at $3.30 per kilogram or less. However, if the price rises even slightly, they will stop buying pork altogether. With a horizontal demand curve, an increase in the price of hogs has no effect on the price consumers pay. However, the equilibrium quantity drops substantially to 205 million kilograms per year. Thus, how much the equilibrium quantity falls and how much the equilibrium price of processed pork rises when the price of hogs increases depend on the shape of the demand curve. Figure 2.8. The effect of the supply curve, depending on the shape of the demand curve. A 25-cent increase in the price of hogs causes the supply curve for processed pork to shift to the left from capital S superscript 1 to capital S superscript 2. Given the actual downward sloping linear demand curve, the equilibrium price rises from $3.30 to $3.55, and the equilibrium quantity falls from $220 to 215. B. The demand curve. If the demand curve were vertical, the supply shock would cause the price to rise to $3.67.5 while the quantity would remain unchanged. If the demand curve were horizontal, the supply shock would not affect price but would cause quantity to fall to 205. Panel A has a downward sloping demand curve with the two supply curves. Panel B has vertical demand, and panel C has horizontal demand.